Hello and welcome back. I am Lindsey Lockett, a trauma educator and nervous system coach and host of the Holistic Trauma Healing Podcast. This is part 3 of a 12-part series of videos called Nourish Your Nervous System. And if you don't want to wait for all 12 parts of this series to be live on video, you can check out my book, Nourish Your Nervous System, at lindseylockett.com/nourish, Nourish. In this third video, I'm going to be talking about the autonomic nervous system and recognizing signs of nervous system dysfunction and dysregulation. If you missed parts 1 and 2 of the series, why don't you go ahead and go back and watch those so that you can be caught up, and then come back to part 3, and then stay tuned for part 4 through 12 that are coming up later on. So I'm going to be teaching from slides in this video. I love teaching from slides because they're informational. They give visual and learners a way to see the information with their eyes. So if you want to take notes, great. If you don't, because you want to have just the slides in the video, that's also awesome. So let me get my slides ready for you. I'll share my screen and then we'll get going. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the autonomic nervous system and recognizing nervous system dysregulation and dysfunction. So let's go. So as I said, this is the third video in my series, Nourish Your Nervous System. I am a trauma educator and a nervous system coach, and I specialize in developmental trauma and complex PTSD. My new book, Nourish Your Nervous System, is available as an immediate download, as an ebook, and as an audiobook. And you can find it at lindseylockett.com/nourish. Before we begin, I feel like it's important to give you a disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist, counselor, or healthcare provider. This presentation is for informational and educational purposes only, and it is not intended to diagnose or treat any physical or mental health condition, nor is this presentation or me a substitute for mental or physical health care. You are responsible for what you choose to do with this information. So who am I and why am I teaching you about your nervous system? In 2007, my eyes were opened to alternative and more natural healthcare options. Our family began seeing a wellness-focused chiropractor who was very educational in her practice, and we started learning about how to nourish our bodies with food and how to take supplements and various things like that. And we began slowly transitioning our diet away from the standard American diet with processed foods and seed oils to more traditional and ancestral foods. Prior to all of this, for my entire adult life, I had many chronic and mysterious symptoms, such as anxiety. I had always struggled with sleep, even from childhood. I had been diagnosed with hypothyroidism at one point. My cortisol was very high. I had a lot of liver issues and digestive issues, lots of heart palpitations whenever I would have anxiety, and more. And this is something that I dealt with for a very, very long time. In fact, the first time I realized that I had anxiety was my first semester of college, and I was having a lot of chest pain and heart palpitations. It was so concerning and painful that my parents actually booked a cardiologist appointment for me, and I had to wear a heart monitor for 24 hours so that they could monitor my heart. And it came back that my heart was totally fine, and they diagnosed me as having anxiety and panic attacks. So that was at the age of 18. So it's been a lifelong thing for me. By 2011, I had my family on the intro phase of a highly restricted gut healing diet called GAPS, and GAPS stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome. I was also seeing a naturopath for all of the aforementioned mystery symptoms that I shared on the previous slide. In 2012, I started doing daily coffee enemas, parasite cleanses, juice detoxes, liver cleanses, and more. I was really throwing everything I could at all of these chronic and mysterious issues because they were severely affecting how I lived my life. And I went to many different practitioners. I sought out naturopaths, nutritionists, chiropractors, homeopaths, and traditional Chinese medicine doctors. And yet my symptoms were not resolving. And sometimes I would even have new symptoms that would just randomly come up. My dark night of the soul actually began in the fall of 2018, basically the year 2018. It's like Murphy's Law was at work in my life. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I was having relationship issues. I was having parenting issues, financial issues, issues in my business at that time, just all kinds of things, car issues even. Everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And the most difficult part of it for me was the issues I was experiencing in my relationship with my husband. And so on March 7th, 2019, after 5 straight months of acute anxiety and panic, insomnia, and severe pelvic pain, I attempted to end my life. I was obviously unsuccessful, thankfully. And I checked myself into the psychiatric hospital and voluntarily checked myself out after 5 days. While I was there, I happily accepted a cocktail of 3 different psych drugs to help me sleep and turn the volume down on my anxiety because it was so acute. In over a decade, so from 2007 to 2019, 12 years of seeing various practitioners, biohacking, spending large amounts of money and time on supplements and protocols, and essentially being on what I now call the hamster wheel of wellness, I never knew about my nervous system. And all of that time, I had no idea the importance that my nervous system played in my physical, mental, and emotional health. When I checked myself out of the psych hospital, I made a promise to myself. I promised myself that I would figure out what got me to such a dark place and that I would heal it. And that is what I have been doing for the past 5 years. When I was in the hospital, I did not have access to my healing diet, foods, or supplements. I don't know if you've ever been to a psychiatric hospital, but you don't get to take any of your normal everyday stuff in with you. You don't have access to your phone. I didn't even have my own clothes. I had to wear hospital scrubs and hospital socks. They were almost going to make me take my nose ring out, but I couldn't figure out how to get it out, and they couldn't figure out how to get it out without cutting it. So I was allowed to keep my nose ring in. But I didn't have any of my normal health stuff, no healing gadgets, no supplements, no diet foods. I didn't even have my phone so that I could Google health information. And believe me when I tell you, I am a recovering health information Googler. I ate hospital food and I took pharmaceutical medications, and I did not get worse. So I was without all the stuff that I thought I needed to be well. And despite being without those things, I was not getting worse. The light bulb went off in my head and I realized if a restricted healing diet and a bunch of supplements had been what I needed to be well, I would have been well. Let me tell you something. I've had a lifelong pattern of perfectionism starting from whenever I was like 7 years old. And so when it came to health and wellness, I was perfect at it. I was able to eat perfectly clean. I took the perfect supplements. I did everything, quote unquote, perfectly, but I was still not getting well. And so it took those 5 days in the hospital of being without all of that stuff for me to have the light bulb go off in my head. It's like, oh my gosh, if all that stuff had been what I needed to be well, I would be well by now. But I've been on this hamster wheel for 10 years, over 10 years. And I'm still not well. In fact, I would say I'm worse. So it was time for me. It was time to stop chasing symptoms. It was time to get off that hamster wheel. Most importantly, it was time to stop looking outside of myself for what I needed to be well. It was time to stop looking at the blogs and looking at YouTube and looking at my naturopath or different doctors and practitioners I was seeing, outsourcing my wellness to supplements and restrictive healing diets. It was time to stop looking outside of myself. It was also time for me to redefine the word healing, because my definition at that time of the word healing was, it means I got rid of it. I fixed it. It's gone. Oh my goodness, it's resolved. And it was time to stop micromanaging and controlling my body. Most importantly, it was time to get to the root cause of all these issues that I've been struggling with for over a decade. Clearly, the root cause was not a lack of supplements or a lack of healthy food. The root cause wasn't solved with coffee enemas or celery juicing or essential oils or infrared lights or anything else. The root cause of all of my chronic and mysterious symptoms, the anxiety, the insomnia, the pelvic pain, the hypothyroidism, all the different issues, the root cause was my very burdened, stressed out, dysregulated nervous system. Something that not a single blogger, healthcare provider, practitioner, no one mentioned it to me. So frustrating that no one ever mentioned my nervous system to me. Every single one of my natural or conventional healthcare providers failed to mention the nervous system's role as the master commander of my entire body. So when I got out of the hospital and got stable, I started devouring information, first on the limbic system, and then that rabbit hole led me to the nervous system. I studied the trauma greats, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, and Dr. Stephen Porges. When I realized that my body's symptoms were actually her way of crying out for help and safety, and that I could actually do something about it that didn't require being on a hamster wheel, going around and around, but never actually getting anywhere, my life changed in a really good way. So, what is the autonomic nervous system? The autonomic nervous system, and where I'm getting this information from, by the way, is a resource called Polyvagal Theory. It's like a science textbook that is very complicated. And many parts of this presentation are distilled from the Polyvagal Theory by Dr. Stephen Porges. So I just want to be very clear that I'm giving him credit for this. So the autonomic nervous system is command central. It is the main communication network between your brain and your body. All of the information that is flowing from brain to body and body to brain is happening along the communication highway of the autonomic nervous system. The nervous system is also an electrical operating system. And you can see here in this diagram that it looks a lot like electrical wires. And it's communicating to us through sensation, nerve activation, neurotransmitters, and signals, which tell us if we are safe or unsafe in our internal and external environments. The autonomic nervous system is like the mycelial network in the forest. And the mycelial network, if you're not familiar with that, is it's underneath the soil. You don't see it on the surface. What you see on the surface is the fruiting body of mushrooms, of fungus. But the mycelium is actually what's underneath that. And it connects everything in the forest to everything else. Trees and other plants actually send messages to each other about pests, disease, carbon, nitrogen, water, and more through the mycelial network. It is the master communication network of the forest. So mycelium is the electrical communication network of the planet, and the autonomic nervous system is the electrical communication network of the body. So when it's functioning optimally, your nervous system is orchestrating everything automatic in your body. So autonomic and automatic have the same root. Everything automatic is things like your heart rate, your respiration, circulation, hormone production, digestion and elimination, sleep cycle, body temperature regulation, reproduction, detoxification, blood pressure, blood sugar, metabolism, and your mental and emotional state. These are all things that when functioning optimally, you should not need to take a pill to make them happen. You don't need to remember to press a button or set a timer and make it happen. Your body is doing all of these things for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for your entire life, until your nervous system gets really overburdened. And then you start seeing chronic and mysterious symptoms related to the automatic function of your body. And that's your body's way of crying out for help. So with the nervous system controlling everything automatic in your body, can you see why the impairment and dysfunction of your autonomic nervous system can cause so many seemingly random and disconnected symptoms? The body cannot, should not be divided into different organs and systems. We should not have to see the cardiologist for the heart, the gastroenterologist for the gut, the dermatologist for the skin, the endocrinologist for our hormones. This paradigm does not honor the human as a whole being. It instead divides us up into various parts, pieces, and systems. And sure, for specializing in something, okay, that's fine. But none of our practitioners are talking to each other about the role of our nervous system in the various organs and systems that may be malfunctioning in our bodies. Healthcare does not consider and involve the healing of the nervous system or trauma's impacts on the brain and nervous system is never going to get to the root cause. If we're not considering the nervous system in our healthcare paradigms, we're never going to get to the root cause of most things, because most of the things we visit our doctors about, unless it's like a broken bone or cancer or something like that, most of the things we see our doctors about revolve around the automatic functioning processes in our bodies. So back to polyvagal theory. I'm going to tell you about your autonomic nervous system. So it has two main branches and one sub branch. The main branches, you've probably heard of them, are your sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of your nervous system. These are like the yin and yang of your body. They have equal and opposite functions in the body. Then there is a sub branch, which is known as the ventral vagal system or the social engagement system. The sympathetic branch of the nervous system is your fight flight response. They're the same thing. When you are in a sympathetic response, your body is mobilizing to fight back, to defend you, using force if necessary, or to run away from a threat. The physiological signs that you are in a fight flight response are things like an increased heart rate, muscle tension, your pupils dilate, and your breathing becomes shallow and quick. And this is because you need a lot of extra oxygen and blood flow going into your muscles. You need your pupils to dilate so you can see more in order to protect yourself from the threat. Your sympathetic branch of your nervous system is something you could think of as the gas of your body. It's the gas pedal, and it is responsible for energy expenditure. Okay. Even if you're not in a threat situation, when you are expending energy, such as, having motivation and drive to get a project done, or being in a leadership setting, or asserting yourself and setting boundaries, or persevering through something difficult, you are in a fight flight energy. You are in energy expenditure mode in your body. Symptoms of being in a chronic fight flight state, however, chronic meaning it goes on longer than is necessary for survival. Original threat has passed, but the nervous system still hasn't calmed down, are things like insomnia and sleep problems, digestive issues like acid reflux and diarrhea, chronic muscle tension, anxiety, and unintegrated anger, meaning when you get angry, you like blow a gasket. Like that anger is really big and explosive. Now, the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, the yin to the yang of the sympathetic branch, is where your freeze and shutdown responses are when you are in a traumatic situation. In polyvagal theory, this is known as a dorsal vagal response, and it is immobilization. So when your body activates a dorsal vagal response, it has determined that fight flight didn't work for safety and survival. So now I need to shut off resources to conserve energy. So it's very immobilizing. You can think of the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system as the brakes of your body, whereas sympathetic is the gas of your body. And some physiological signs that you are in a parasympathetic state are that your heart rate decreases, your body feels weak or heavy, you might be sleeping too much, you don't have very much energy, and you're really easily overwhelmed by stress. Like stressors that other people seem to be handling just fine, you're not really handling very well. So symptoms of being in a chronic shutdown or chronic immobilization state are things like chronic fatigue. I would also add chronic pain to this, depression, dissociation, sleeping too much, and having low energy and low mood. Now, the sub branch is the ventral vagal system or social engagement system. This is a sub branch of your parasympathetic system. So you've probably heard of this just referred to as parasympathetic. You may have also heard of this as being like the rest and digest or feed and breed state of the nervous system. Although it is along the same branch as the shutdown response, the dorsal vagal response, it's not a survival response. When you are in rest and digest or feed and breed, you are in a ventral vagal response. This is also called a safe and social state. So you will feel calm, relaxed, and able to connect with others. You're more likely to have open body language and good posture. Your breathing is regular and deep. You can be creative. You can collaborate with others. You can participate in exciting conversation. You're in a state where you can make art and music, and you have access to safe touch and safe intimacy. The ventral vagal system or social engagement system feels like joy, hope, curiosity, groundedness, openness, a felt sense of safety, easeful movement, and you feel connected and like you belong with others. So think about this. If you're walking through the woods and you come across a bear, you don't have time to sit there and think about what to do, right? You're not making a pros and cons list about what you should do. You're not phoning a friend and asking them for their advice about what you should do about this bear, right? without having to do anything, without you even having to think about it, your body springs into action. Your fight flight response is activated because you only have two options to survive this scenario. You're either going to fight the bear or you're going to get the hell out of the forest and run away as fast as you possibly can. That is an appropriate response to an actual threat. A bear in the woods is an actual threat. But our modern day stressors like mortgages and credit card bills and financial obligations and divorce and custody battles and 8 to 5 jobs and calling our kids all over the place and being a taxi driver and getting into conflict with friends or partners, those types of things in our bodies register the same way as a bear in the woods does. The limbic brain and nervous system do not detect a difference between primal ancestral threats like wild animals, moving herds, famine and drought, and modern stressors like your 8 to 5 job, custody battles, over-exercising, climate change, all the things that I mentioned earlier. The limbic brain and nervous system don't know the difference. So there are pretty obvious original sources of chronic nervous system dysregulation. We would define these as like post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. So these are things like natural disasters, war or military service, accidents, the death of a parent or child, a school shooting, a home invasion, physical or sexual abuse. It is not difficult to understand why a nervous system would be chronically dysregulated after some of these events because they're really big deals. In many circles, these are called big T trauma, but I really do stay away from using big T and little t trauma because I think that it leads to trauma comparison. So these types of things, it's easy to go, oh yeah, like my entire home was destroyed by a wildfire. Like, of course, that's going to create some dysregulation. I was in a terrible accident. Of course, that's going to create dysregulation. But we also have not always obvious sources of chronic nervous system dysregulation. And these are things like if you had a passive aggressive parent growing up, if you got the silent treatment from a parent, if you had an overly critical parent who maybe expected you to perform really well and had really high standards for your grades or your sports performance or something like that. If one or both of your parents was physically available, but emotionally they weren't there, that's called emotional abandonment. Or if your parents' attention was going to a chronically ill or disabled sibling, that will also register as a threat in the body of a child, even though logically it makes sense that the parent's attention is going more to the chronically ill or disabled sibling. More examples of not always obvious sources of chronic nervous system dysregulation are things like firstborn daughters who raise younger siblings. Hello, where my firstborn daughter's at. Air quotes, normal childhood events such as being bullied, a broken bone, medical interventions, if your parents went through divorce and custody battle, or if you were living with a parent's chronic mental or physical health issues. You may not always connect some of those things as being a source of dysregulation in your nervous system. Whether you know the original source of your dysregulation or not, certain types of language indicate chronic nervous system dysregulation. And here's just a few examples. I could do an entire presentation on just language that indicates trauma, but for now, we'll go with this short list. I'm not worthy. I'm too much, or I'm not enough. I feel misunderstood. I feel like I'm not considered. I shouldn't feel this way. I'm ashamed of myself. Or using eternity language like I'm always this or I'm never that. These are some indicators of language that show chronic nervous system dysregulation. The autonomic nervous system does not operate in the realm of logic or reason. Its only job is to keep you alive by keeping you safe. The nervous system activates in the presence of actual danger, like a bear in the woods, and perceived danger, like a slightly overdue electrical bill. It is connected with the survival part of your brain, which is the limbic system. This is the most primitive part of our brain, and it includes the amygdala, which is the fear center. That's the threat detection center of our body. It also includes the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the brainstem, and the rest of the nervous system, and our adrenal gland, the pituitary gland, where signals for stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol are produced. The autonomic nervous system activates whatever response it innately detects is necessary for survival. So, in the presence of a bear in the woods, your nervous system is going to activate in fight flight because that is what's going to be necessary for you to survive. You either need to mobilize your nervous system so you can fight the bear, you need to mobilize so you can run away, or you immobilize to conserve energy when fight and flight fail. So, what does the nervous system perceive as a threat? What counts as a threat? We have 3 different types of threats. The first is internal threats. So these can be things like physical pain or other concerning sensations. Especially if you have health anxiety, then any sensation at all really registers as a threat. Negative self-talk, when you fail to meet your basic needs, such as you don't eat when you're hungry, you don't pee when you need to pee, you don't drink water when you're thirsty, you don't go to sleep when your body's telling you that it's tired. Hypervigilance, self-shaming, and catastrophization or worst case thinking. Environmental threats is our second type of threat. So these would be things like food or housing insecurity, overworking, natural disasters and climate stress, systemic oppression, and for some people, specific smells, sounds, and places will register in the nervous system as a threat. And finally, relational threats. And this is where we see a lot of complex PTSD forming, especially for children, because unlike post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, complex PTSD always has a relational component. So these are things like rejection, bullying, being controlled, unfair criticism, or abandonment by meaningful attachment relationships such as parents, siblings, grandparents, and close friends, religious control, and abandonment by romantic partners. If you're on the receiving end of passive aggressiveness or the silent treatment or shame, that will also register as a threat. And certain facial expressions and tones of voice can also be perceived as threatening. In his book, Complex PTSD, author Pete Walker talks about the look. And I think many of us can identify with our parents giving us the look, or maybe you're a parent who's given your child the look. And it's that sort of like with just their facial expression in their eyes, the parent is communicating disdain, disappointment, and disgust. And they don't even have to say a word or like use physical force like spanking. The look is enough to do it. That absolutely registers as a threat in the body. So dysregulation is only ever meant to be temporary. It is never meant to be ongoing and chronic. When a threat is neurocepted, the nervous system mobilizes to seek the fastest route to safety, and once achieved, the threat response naturally resolves and the body can return to homeostasis. The stress hormones will go back down, you will feel more relaxed as your muscles release tension, your heart rate will go down, your breathing will return to normal. That's what's supposed to happen. But for people in chronic dysregulation, that step doesn't happen. It's important to state that your nervous system has always been on your side. I know many people feel, especially people with chronic health conditions, you feel like your body has betrayed you, like your body has misbehaved in some way. I remember feeling very resentful towards my body at one time and just being like, ugh, I've given you all this expensive organic food and I've piped you full of supplements and I've gone to see these amazing practitioners and you're getting acupuncture and massage and Epsom salt baths and all this organic juice and all this stuff. And you're still not doing what I want you to do. Oh, I remember that feeling. But that was before I knew about my nervous system. And when I learned about my nervous system, I was like, oh, right. My nervous system has actually always been on my side. Everything that the nervous system does, even the things we don't like, even the feelings we don't like, even the symptoms we don't like, are always the nervous system's attempt to keep us safe and alive. So what does it mean to heal the nervous system? That's a very trendy thing to talk about right now is, oh, I'm healing my nervous system. I just need to heal my nervous system. What does that actually mean? Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. Healing your nervous system does not mean that you are trying to achieve a never-ending state of bliss or calm, or that you never experience dysregulation. Healing does not mean that you are always able to handle whatever stressors come your way, and it does not mean that you never get triggered ever again. All of these things are not only impossible, they are unrealistic expectations. So if you have these expectations, maybe even subconsciously, as you've been on your nervous system healing journey, I am giving you permission to let them go. to surrender these expectations or these beliefs about healing, because if this is what you're going for, you are going to be disappointed over and over and over again. When you say that you want to heal your nervous system, you have recognized that your nervous system lacks three things. First is capacity. So that's the space that your nervous system has to hold stress. The second is resiliency, which is your ability to bounce back from stress. And a third is flexibility, which means you can move easily between various nervous system states without becoming chronically stuck. Your nervous system responds appropriately to a threat, and then it returns to homeostasis when the threat has passed. So you're lacking capacity, resiliency, and flexibility. Nourishing your nervous system. When you nourish your nervous system, this is about more than just regulation. This is deeper than regulation. You are shoring up your body's reserves to deal with stress. You are creating safety within yourself. A nourished nervous system doesn't get taken out by daily life stress. There is some resiliency and capacity to handle that stress. And a certain level of stress is actually necessary for us to be resilient. If we never faced stress, we would not be resilient people. A malnourished nervous system is easily overwhelmed by stressors to the point that doing expansive things is too much. And so this is when we see people procrastinating, feeling that imposter syndrome, not going after what they want, not starting the business, not putting themselves out there on social media, not doing the expansive thing because their nervous system is malnourished and that thing is perceived as too much. So I want to talk about what I call the web of life. If you are unfamiliar with this, you can go back to the first video in this series where I share a really special story that I call the parable of the spider's web. It's a real life experience that I had with a spider's web, and having this experience was seriously like an immediate download of understanding and information from the universe. I didn't have to go seeking it out in books or podcasts or anyplace else. Just observing nature caused this information to come through for me in a really embodied way. So I'm going to talk about the web of life, and it's what makes you you and why nourishing all aspects of you is necessary for healing. So here's kind of an example of the spider's web. We have the anchor threads that go out, and this is what, hooks onto the tree or the fence or the gate or the corner of the room or whatever. In the center here, this is called the hub of the web. And generally the hub of the spider's web, the center, is a very, very tightly woven space. And as the web goes out, the spaces between the radials get wider. So obviously this spider's web has way more than 6 anchor points, but I'm going to give you 6 aspects of what makes us whole people. So we have a physical body, right? We are very much physical beings, and we require nourishment on a physical level from food and water in order to nourish our physical bodies. We also have minds. We have minds that love to make meaning out of everything, that loves to think and overthink sometimes. And our egos live in our minds, and our egos like to tell stories and make meaning out of things and keep us stuck in some patterns that don't actually serve us. And while mental nourishment is important in terms of what you're consuming, through social media, through the news, what you're reading, what you're watching, things like that, but your thoughts are always a reflection of the state of your nervous system. So if your nervous system is dysregulated, it's very likely that your thoughts are also dysregulated. So mental nourishment is required as well. And I will have an entire video talking about mental nourishment later on in this series. Ancestral nourishment, right? You wouldn't exist if it had not been for the people who came before you. And because of the work of people like Mark Wolin and his book, It Didn't Start With You, we have learned that traumas actually pass through generations. And while you hold the DNA of your ancestors, you also hold in your body many of the threatening, deadly survival situations that they experienced. And you hold the resilience of your ancestors to make it through those things, because if they hadn't made it through those things, you wouldn't exist. And a huge piece of my work is actually helping people connect back with their ancestry and be the cycle breaker in their family and in their lineage. We are also spiritual beings. We have a part of us that is not our body, that is not our mind, that is not our emotions, that is not our ancestry. You could call it consciousness, soul, spirit, your higher self, your true self, the watcher, the observer, whatever you want to call it. You have a part of you that is not your body, is not your mind, and it has the ability to watch all of it. This is a very energetic part of you. We are emotional creatures, right? We have emotions and we experience feelings on a very deep, deep level. And it's important to nourish our emotional experiences through validating our own emotions, learning how to validate others' emotions, learning how to feel our feelings instead of distracting ourselves, dissociating, ignoring our feelings. Emotional nourishment is super important and it is a part of our web of life. And then finally, we are relational beings. We are herd animals, pack animals. We need each other to survive. And our nervous systems rely on other nervous systems to co-regulate and to attune to in order to feel safe. And so we can't do any of this physical, mental, ancestral, spiritual, and emotional work without bringing it into our relationships. So these are the 6 aspects of the whole person that inform my work, which is called holistic trauma healing. And when I'm talking about healing trauma in a holistic way, I'm talking about healing it through the physical body, healing it in the mind, healing it in the ancestry, healing it in relationships, healing it emotionally, and healing it spiritually. It's a very, very holistic, deep process. So now I want to talk to you about recognizing chronic nervous system dysregulation and malnourishment. All right. Nervous system dysregulation is neurological. It is all in your head, but it's not all in your head. So this is things like frequent headaches or migraines, brain fog, ADD and ADHD, poor memory, lack of focus, any kind of tingling or numbness in your face, hands, or feet. And when it's really severe, it's degenerative illnesses like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. Nervous system dysregulation is also gastrointestinal. So this is the gut-brain connection. Yes, gut health is important, but guess what? Your nervous system is the master commander of your gut. So when you have gastrointestinal symptoms like heartburn, acid reflux, bloating and cramping, constipation, chronic diarrhea, food intolerances, irritable bowel syndrome, SIBO, or other gut issues, then your nervous system is letting you know in a way that is manifesting as gut symptoms and gut health issues. And yes, things like bone broth and yogurt and sauerkraut and, limiting processed food and limiting seed oils and all that from your diet can be really helpful and supportive of your gut and your overall body. But if you don't unburden the nervous system of its dysregulation, then you're not going to be doing as much good as you could. Next, nervous system regulation looks and feels like basic body regulation issues. So any kind of imbalances in blood sugar, blood pressure, hormones. If your immune system doesn't function that well, you find yourself getting sick a lot, you've got poor circulation, insomnia, or other sleep issues like sleep apnea. If your body temperature isn't regulating, so you find yourself running too hot or more commonly too cold. If you have allergies, a slow metabolism, or dysautonomia, those are just basic body regulation issues because remember, the nervous system controls everything automatic in your body. Next, nervous system dysregulation and dysfunction can be cardiovascular. So things like asthma, POTS, heart palpitations, and frequent fainting are all ways that your body is speaking to you about your nervous system. In children, it looks like developmental issues such as delays, sensory processing issues, speech and sensory motor delays, autism, ADD, ADHD, PANDAS, and PANS. For more information about this, specifically developmental issues in children, I highly recommend the book, The Nemetschek Protocol. It's a guide for restoring neurological function, and he wrote it specifically for children and people with developmental issues and autism. So I highly recommend the Nemetschek Protocol book. Next, nervous system dysregulation and dysfunction looks like poor quality of life. So chronic pain, chronic fatigue, erectile dysfunction, low sex drive, autoimmune conditions and disorders, chronic hunger, thirst, or balance issues. And it's also psychological. So this is where the mental illness part comes in. Mental illness is very much not in your mind. It's very rooted in your body and in dysregulation of your nervous system. It is a symptom of nervous system dysregulation, anxiety, panic attacks, depression. postpartum depression and anxiety, PTSD, complex PTSD, diagnoses like bipolar, emotional flashbacks, triggers, and dissociation. And finally, nervous system dysregulation is displayed in our behaviors. And there are way too many behaviors to list, so I'm just listing the big ones here. These are things like perfectionism, people pleasing, not setting boundaries or not holding boundaries, shaming yourself, disordered eating, addiction, catastrophizing, hypervigilance, good girl or good boy programming, and also like a feeling or behaving as if I'm too much or I'm not enough. Or for me, it's I'm both too much and not enough. So doesn't it make sense? After all this information, doesn't it make sense why so many people suffer with chronic and mysterious physical, mental, and emotional symptoms that neither they nor their doctors can link to the root cause, right? When you take a pill to stop symptoms, you're not getting at the root cause. You're just suppressing symptoms. If you stop taking the pill, the thing comes back. So you haven't gotten to the root. The root cause of these types of symptoms is the dysregulation of a nervous system burdened by lifelong stressors. Sorry about the typo there. The dysregulation of a nervous system burdened by lifelong stressors. So temporary activation, meaning you see the bear in the woods, nervous system goes into a fight flight response. You either fight the bear, which I don't advise, or you run away to get back to safety. That's temporary activation of your nervous system. As soon as you're out of that situation, your nervous system is going to come back to homeostasis and it is going to be restored to a calm and safe state. But continued prolonged activation without the necessary opportunity to return to safety causes these issues because chronic survival states are not sustainable for anybody's body. If one is viewing the body as individual organs and systems, these issues seem like they're not connected. And that's the issue I was having when I went to all these different practitioners for the 12 years that I was on the hamster wheel of wellness. Nobody was connecting the symptoms. I mean, how do you give a diagnosis to someone who presents with insomnia, hypothyroidism, anxiety, heart palpitations, food intolerances, and an inability to lose weight? And PMS and menstrual issues. Like I have a whole host of issues. Like it doesn't seem like there's any connection there. But when you view the body as a whole and through the lens of the nervous system being the master commander of all of those things, then these symptoms make perfect sense. There is nothing wrong with you if your nervous system is dysregulated, even if it's chronically dysregulated. I know it doesn't feel good, but your body is a genius to protect you so consistently and so wisely. And maybe you're recognizing that your body at one time was responding appropriately to stress, but you never had that chance to come back to a calm state so that the chronic dysregulation could end. So your nervous system is still responding as if that threat is present right now. Or maybe you do have a bunch of little threats in your life, but they're all adding up and creating a lot of overwhelm for your nervous system. But many of us are still carrying the dysregulation of unprocessed trauma in our bodies all the way back from childhood. But now we're adults and we don't need as much protection as adults as we did when we were kids. So our nervous systems don't need to be so on guard all the time because we're not in a survival situation. And it is a survival situation if a parent is emotionally abandoning you. For a child's body, that is a life or death situation because we rely on our parents so much and for so long. Our dysregulation shows up in adult settings and relationships. And we have adaptive survival patterns like hypervigilance, people-pleasing, perfectionism, anxiety, depression, and more. And often these things have gone on for so long that people think, oh, it's just my personality. I'm just a type A, perfectionist, anxious person. Or I've always been, low energy and kind of depressed. It's just my personality. It's not your personality. It's easy to think of these things as personality, especially if it's all you've ever known of yourself. But really, these traits are signposts that your nervous system needs unburdening, healing, and nourishing. Your dysregulated nervous system is your body speaking to you. The language of your body is feeling and sensation, and sometimes symptoms. How else is your body going to talk to you? Your body can't talk to you with actual words. All he has to talk to you are sensations. And sometimes those sensations are symptoms. The sensations and symptoms, all the things that you believe mean there's something wrong with you, that something's broken and you need to fix it, are signs that your body is doing everything right. I know it doesn't feel right, but it is actually a sign that your body is very much trying to achieve homeostasis by getting you to be safe. Dysregulation is only present when there is a lack of safety, whether that safety is real or perceived. There's a lack of safety, so the body activates the nervous system and you feel dysregulated. When you can nourish your nervous system back to safety, back to life, creating that safety within, like the center tight spiral of the spider's web, many of these uncomfortable issues will naturally reduce or resolve. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it with countless clients and students. I hear stories all the time of people experiencing sometimes even spontaneous resolution of issues that have plagued them for years, even decades, because they unburdened, they healed, and they nourished their nervous system. So that's the end of this presentation. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is part 3 of the Nourish Your Nervous System series. This series is based off of my book, Nourish Your Nervous System, which is a whole holistic guide to healing and nervous system nourishment. You can find my book as an instant download or as an audiobook at lindseylockett.com/nourish. So please stay tuned. Part 4 will be coming very soon. And in that video, I'm going to be talking about trauma's impacts on the brain and nervous system. Please like this video and subscribe. And you can also find me on Instagram at I am Lindsey Lockett. Lindsey is with an EY, not an AY. Or you can check out anything on my website at lindseylockett.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in part 4.